of our conversation this morning. It's all about the El Nino rains and, of course, the pains and the rains that have come with that. Disaster management amid deluges of death and destruction. We do have Bramwell Simiyu, who's the Chief Officer, Disaster Management and Coordination, Nairobi County, is actually joining me here in studio this morning. Good morning, good to see you.
Good morning,
and
Zainab.
Karibu Sana.
Asante.
We also do have Dr. David Gikungu joining us virtually as the Director of the Kenya Meteorological Department, who's joined us and will be giving us more details on this particular matter when we get into that conversation. Doc, good to see you if you can hear me. And Karibu Sana to our AM Live show this morning. And also in just a little while, we'll also have Peter Murgor, who's a manager, disaster risk management from the Kenya Red Cross Society as well. So these are the gentlemen we'll be having a conversation with regard to what we're witnessing in terms of the floods situation across different parts of the country. And of course, it's all related to the El Nino phenomenon. Doc will be giving us more details on that. But just very quickly to give you a glimpse of what is captured in our dailies this morning. Daily Nation, this is what is captured. Kenya Kwanza MPs plead to Ruto on the issue of fuel. Some Kenya Kwanza MPs yesterday pleading with President William Ruto to reintroduce a fuel subsidy program, lamenting that their constituents are increasingly becoming hostile to them because of the high pump prices as well as additional taxes. A section of ruling party legislators were also said to have spoken out against the planned deployment of Kenya's police officers on a UN peace mission in Haiti. A full splash on page 4 and 5 of the DN. Also, tough times forces retirees back to work. Let's see what's captured inside. All right, there's a story here on woman who sues mom in court fight over land inheritance. Also, police granted a month to finalize the EAPCC land probe. Of course, that's the East Africa Portland Cement Company in Mavoko. We saw what happened there with regard to the demolitions that took place a couple of weeks ago. Meanwhile, Rare Fit, Form 2 student, has work of fiction published, and an interesting read there of, the students, parents and teachers saying this young man has remained focused on his education. Interestingly, he has his work of fiction that has now been published, and he says even though he's eyeing a career in medicine, will still keep his passion for writing alive. And there you have it. That's what's captured on the front page of the DN. Bring back fuel subsidy to reduce cost of living. Kenya Kwanza MPs urge the president. And this is during yesterday's meeting of the ruling coalition's parliamentarians. Lawmakers were pleading with the president to reintroduce fuel subsidies because of what they say reportedly telling the head of state that they have become unpopular in their constituencies because of some of the government's policies, including the issue of high taxation, which they say goes against the president's bottom-up approach, which they rode on during the campaigns to get into power. However, just a quick one here is that Ruto rejects subsidy calls, terms it unsustainable. And according to the Daily Nation, a member of parliament who attended the meeting, the president flatly rejected the push for fuel subsidy, saying it was unsustainable. The president reportedly telling MPs that they only need to be popular at the right time and not all the time. Nominated Senator Veronica Maina is said to have raised the matter with the president, telling him the Kenya Kwanza government should find ways to cushion Kenyans, according to MPs present. Several sources confirming that the fuel crisis was a matter of concern, with some MPs suggesting that the Kenya Kwanza administration was becoming unpopular because of some of these policies. You can get that full report on the DN. Meanwhile, Mwangaza is also set to know her fate today as senators vote. That's the Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza. Her fate will be determined by senators who are going to vote to either uphold her impeachment or dismiss those particular charges she's facing. She will, however, be given a chance to plead her case before the Senate. And yesterday we did have the MCAs from Meru putting up a spirited legal battle to convince the lawmakers that they were right to impeach Mwangaza. So which way will it go? That is something we'll be keeping a close eye on as well with regard to that impeachment of the Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza for a second time in less than a year. Meanwhile, plans to amend the penal code on. Koome confirms, as the Chief Justice Martha Koome was confirmed, that plans to have some of the sections of the penal code as proposed by the National Council on Administrative Justice continues. This is despite some concern caused by the Penal Code Amendment Bill 2023 presented by the same NCAJ through the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms. And, the bill seeks to delete some sections there, which has caused quite a furore. Meanwhile, let's see very quickly as we wind up on this, Ruto to mark tree planting day in Makueni. Remember, there is a public holiday that has been announced, a national holiday on Monday that has been set aside specifically for tree planting here in the country. And the president will be leading Kenyans in marking that inaugural National Tree Planting Day in Makueni County, and that is on Monday. So we'll be hearing more about that particular matter. The government planning to enlist the private sector in developing and managing forests in the country as well. And finally, tough economic times forcing retirees to work longer than their bodies can cope. We have at least 44 counties who have not submitted pension contributions deducted for years from employees paying, amounting to 33 billion. So what does this mean for when you do retire? At this point, it's quite a tough situation for those who are retiree and they are forced to go back to work because of the economic situation. The elderly people compelled to resume work because retirement is quite tough with no money, and so they have to make ends meet. And this is where we are as a country right now. Business Daily, state reveals plan to increase land fees by up to 100 times. Well, that's a plan, part of a World Bank-backed revenue expansion push, and incorporation of a trust to cost 50,000 from 500 shillings. Also, Kenya wins bid to lead Africa's push to cut dollar dominance. And of course, that's a bid to host an electronic platform which will enable traders on the continent to settle deals in respective national currencies, placing it in the front line of a push by African countries to reduce reliance on the US dollar. On the tick of the BD also you can read, Farms freeze expansion plans on economic woes. Airtel Africa sticking to the $825 million fresh capital plan despite loss. And also the Swiss Bell Hotel to manage Emory Nairobi Safari Club. You can get all that in your Business Daily as well. On Taifa Leo, uchumi wastaafu warudi soko. Hali ngumu ya kiuchumi nchini yasukuma wazee waliostaafu kung'ang'ana kutafuta kazi kujikimu kimaisha. Maelfu ya wafanyikazi yaliokuwa mabaraza ya miji na serikali ya kaunti waliostaafu wamelazimika kurudi kazini kuepuka umaskini baada ya kaunti 44 kukosa kuwasilisha malipo yao ya uzeeni. All right, that's all about the retirees who are now forced to go back to work because of the tough economic situations being forced in the country, being experienced in the country. But also, on the sidelines of Taifa Leo, and of course it's been quite a big story, hasara mvua ikiendelea kupanda nchi, and it captures what we're going to have a conversation on. Maelfu watoroka makwao, barabara kuharibiwa na huduma za stima kutatizwa. All right, that's on page 4. There you have it of the Taifa Leo publication there. You can see a picture there of what is happening really. Trailer yapita kwenye barabara iliyojaa maji kwenye barabara kuu ya Nakuru Eldoret. Mvua kubwa inayoendelea kunyesha nchini ikisababisha hasara tele kwa wananchi. And that is the situation right now as we are seeing it. Meanwhile, on the East African, just very quickly, how Uganda AGOA ban will impact the East Africa community. That's the economic effects which are forecast to spill over to the regional trading partners as the value chains are heavily integrated. And also on the Standard, just very quickly to give you a glimpse, gloomy state of the nation as the president faces a nation drained by the high cost of living in his second annual State of the Nation address tomorrow. Kenyans expect this even as he highlights achievements of his 14-month-old administration. He will list concrete steps to make their lives better. So that's what is on the Standard, the issue of cost of living, the issue of justice, the issue of fuel, the issue of corporate health. And of course, we'll be giving you a 360 coverage of the State of the Nation address by the president tomorrow. And on the Star, let's see also, UDA MPs confront Ruto over the issue of the cost of living. Legislators warning the cost of living is making Kenya Kwanza unpopular with Kenyans. Page 4 and 6, 4 to 5 of the Star newspaper as well. And also, front page, it's all about what's going to happen today with regard to Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza, who faces the vote at the Senate on whether they will be upholding that impeachment by the MCAs. And back to our conversation now. It's all about the El Nino rains and pains, and it's all about also disaster management amid what is happening in terms of the death and destruction that have been caused by the rains. All right, just to remind you once again, in studio, I'm joined by Bramwell Simiyu, Chief Officer, Disaster Management and Coordination from Nairobi County. In a short while, we'll also have Peter Murgor, who's a manager at the Disaster Risk Management Department from the Kenya Red Cross Society. And also joining us live is Dr. David Gikungu, the director from the Kenya Met Department as well. And I want to begin with you, Dr. Gikungu. Just, you know, there has been conflicting information that Kenyans have received with regard to really where we are on the heavy rains we're experiencing. Please, just give us a clear picture. Are we in an El Nino season right now? Are the heavy rains that we're experiencing at this point an indication that it is the El Nino phenomenon that was predicted months on?
Good morning, viewers. Good question you ask. Yes, the heavy rainfall that we are experiencing is associated with the phenomena that we had announced earlier on when we issued the seasonal forecast, because there were indications that the El Nino signals coupled with Indian Ocean dipole were showing positivity that could lead to enhanced rainfall in the East Africa region. So indeed, it is confirmed that this is an El Nino event. And this is not just in Kenya, but worldwide. Only that East Africa is one of the zones that benefit in terms of enhanced rainfall. In other places, it causes serious drought. Thank you.
All right, and Bramwell, let me get to you just to give us, first of all, an idea of the situation, because I know you focused in Nairobi County, we're getting to hear from the national perspective. But, you know, from where you sit, give us an idea, paint for us a picture of how these rains have affected residents of this county.
Thank you very much, Zainab, for having me on the show, and good morning, viewers. I also bring you greetings from the leadership of the county government of Nairobi. As Dr. has mentioned, indeed you're witnessing enhanced rainfall. Nairobi County typically has two seasons. We have the long rains in April, around April, and the shorter rains around October, November. Now, if you look at the trends in the past, and if you look at our topography, we've always had problems with the flooding and flash floods in Nairobi, even with the normal rains, largely because of a drainage system that was aged and also inadequate, but also badly maintained. And we often have cases of flooding in many parts of the city. If you understand the topography of Nairobi County, the western part is much higher, where the rivers originate from, while the lower part towards the Eastlands area is flatter. So we have all these rivers, the Ngong River, the Mathare River, Kibagari, and so on, Nairobi River flowing eastwards towards the eastern part, converging around Ruai and the Embakasi area, Dandora area, before going into the Athi River. Now, what has happened in the past was, as I mentioned, we faced a lot of these floods, largely because our drainage system was unkempt. Now, when this administration led by His Excellency Governor Sakaja came into effect, we adopted a holistic approach to disaster management. Prevention is better than cure. So what we've done is to align the disaster management strategy towards preventive maintenance. And it is for that reason that you will recall that His Excellency oversaw the onboarding of 2,500, what you call the Green Army, which has been at the front line of cleaning and unblocking the drainage system. And you will notice that even with the rains, the results of what this Green Army has done are profound. Traditionally, we've seen areas such as Uhuru Highway, we've seen South Sea, we've seen even the CBD, the Bunyala Road area, witnessing a lot of floods. This time round, I'm happy to report that the output is positive. We've not seen as much flooding in the traditionally the areas which are normally typically affected, but to also acknowledge that we still have a few challenges, particularly in areas that people have settled on riparian lands. So we'll have the Madari area, we'd have some areas like the Mukuru area, where people have encroached in riparian lands. And also in areas where through what I'd call human reasons, people have built on drainage systems and pathways, we still have a few challenges. But this has given us an opportunity as a county government to now refocus our efforts towards ensuring that such areas are sorted out.
Right.
Just to also report, Zainab, that at the onset we mapped out the hotspots. There were about 500 and slightly over 500 hotspots that were identified. Areas like the Joseph Karanja Road in Kibra, we had areas that we had a few challenges, along the Langata Road and so on and so forth, and South Sea. What has happened is that we've achieved a 78% success rate in terms of clearing the drainage systems that were blocked because of littering, because of garbage, and so on and so forth. So we believe that you're on the cause. We are on the right path in terms of ensuring that Nairobians live in dignity, and just to align ourselves with His Excellency's manifesto to create a city of order, a city where we are able to, to be able to discharge our duties and responsibilities, without worrying about our safety and security to the extent that has been witnessed in the past.
But I'll come back to you in a moment, but I want you to think about this. We still have dozens of families who have been affected by these floods. Many of the houses have been damaged, and property has been damaged as well. Nairobi is part of the counties that were mapped out will be receiving this enhanced rainfall. But is it the fact that counties were caught flat-footed that they did not really prepare themselves quite well when it comes to the issue of El Nino? But I'll come back to you in a moment. I want us to take a look at this particular report on what is happening across the country as well. Over 26,000 families affected by floods as a result of the El Nino, according to the Kenya Red Cross Society. The counties of Wajir, Garissa and Mandera are the most affected, with homes being submerged and lives being disrupted. East Africa Community and ASAL Regional Cabinet Secretary Penina Malonzo on Tuesday visiting both Wajir and Mandera counties and assessing the flood situation. Let's have Rose Wangoi with that report.
Heavy rains continue to pound northeastern region, leaving behind deaths, destruction and displacement. In Wajir County, the ongoing rains have caused severe flooding, affecting over 2,000 people and destroying their sources of livelihoods. The floods have also submerged local schools, hospitals and roads, hampering service delivery and access to markets. The East African Community and ASAL Region Cabinet Secretary Penina Malonza was on a fact-finding mission in Wajir County to assess the flood situation. The worst affected areas include Dif, Bute, Eldas and Bona. Some areas cannot be accessed because they have been submerged by the floods.
While 19 counties are affected in the entire country, the counties of Wajir and Mandera are the most affected. A number of those towns have been completely cut off from the rest of the country, which means that there is no supply getting in and no one moving out.
Mandera County is battling severe floods which have impacted over 5,000 households. According to humanitarian agencies, the numbers are likely to rise as the rains continue to pound the area. Elwak town is completely flooded. The heavy rains have submerged and destroyed many houses and toilets in surrounding local areas. In the aftermath of the heavy rains, numerous families were left homeless and without access to food. Locals fear breakout of waterborne diseases as the rains increase in the village, and the displaced are struggling to survive through the situation. Mandera North and Mandera East remain the most affected, following the heavy rains that led to River Dawa bursting its banks and flooding all nearby homesteads. According to Kenya Red Cross Society, 13,473 people residing in the counties of Wajir, Garissa and Mandera are the most affected.
And we believe the county governments do not have the capacity to do anything about what is happening now. So we're asking the government to intervene.
Work, which we realize actually we need to do something very urgently because the entire town is already submerged and the situation is very critical. We need to evacuate people in that place.
The CS says the government will support all the affected families with sanitation products and assorted foodstuff to cope with the situation.
From what I saw today, we really need to hike the game higher because now it's not about provision of food or non-food items. My ministry will be working together with our partners so that we can also begin mobilizing resources.
Area residents have, however, been advised to move to safer places. In the latest weather forecast, the Meteorological Department has warned that heavy rainfall is expected to continue in most parts of the country. Rozongoi, NTV.
All right, and now in studio also joining us is Peter Murgor, who's a manager disaster risk management from the Kenya Red Cross Society. Good morning, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
And we've seen that report by Rozongoi just capturing really painting for us a picture of the situation. But give us an update from the experience that we're having right now as a country. We went to different parts of Wajir, Northeastern specifically, which has been highly affected by the floods. But give us a national outlook of where we are right now.
Yeah, just like even you had the brief yesterday, is we are having the national outlook. And of course, yes, Wajir, Mandera, Garissa being mostly affected. We are seeing in the coastal region, Tana River as well. When you go to upper eastern region, Isiolo and Samburu being those who are predisposed. And then parts of Meru, you might have heard about some incidences of landslides. You go to West Kenya, where there is the downstream because of the Nzoia River Basin.
Right.
So approximately 19 to 20 counties that are now likely to be affected by the increased water levels, and in some cases surface water runoff, in some cases flooding. So it's just as the rains continue to increase in intensity and magnitude, the water levels are rising and we are likely to experience more flooding. Yeah, correctly so also the number of people who are affected ranging to 26,000, and the numbers are rising. You know, it's interesting how the numbers keep rising very fast.
So this is what, 26,000 households or families, or is it 26,000 people who've been directly affected by the floods?
You know, there's the households. You know,
Right.
when you take households, that even increases. When you go now into the number of people who are directly
That
affected,
would increase in
it would
number.
increase, yeah. So, but we are looking into households because you find that those who are affected either by losing livelihoods, their business are affected, they are having to move to safer grounds, but then you find there are those who are totally displaced, that now they need intervention for shelter, temporary shelter, to be settled somewhere. For example, and when you had my colleague Brian, whom we've been working very closely with Kenya Red Cross and the Nairobi County, for instance, in Nairobi, if you look at Mukuru, Kwanjenga, the informal settlements, you see these people are already beginning to get affected. So they may not have been displaced, but they are exposed now to issues around waterborne or vector-borne diseases.
Right.
They are at risk due to flooding.
Right.
So that shows you the effects when we talk about affected and displaced. Yeah.
All right. I want us to take a break on that point. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Remember, you can engage us on our social media platforms, MLive NTV, at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. Talk to us. We're going to be back in a short while. All right, thank you for staying with us as we take a look at some of the things happening in the country. And of course, this is focusing on the floods situation that we're witnessing across the country. Joining me in studio, of course, is Bramwell Simiyu, the Chief Officer, Disaster Management and Coordination from Nairobi County. We also have Peter Murgor, Manager at the Disaster Risk Management Kenya Red Cross Society. And also joining us virtually is Dr. David Gikungu, who's the Director at the Kenya Meteorological Department here in the country. And now that it's clear we're actually experiencing the El Nino phenomenon, Daktari, kindly just break down for us how this phenomenon is impacting the floods, and we'll be getting to Daktari in a moment once we fix that, a bit of a signal issue there. But going back to the issue of coordination of the county and national government as well, we'll come back to you, Peter, on that particularly. Be telling us how Kenya Red Cross is really managing that situation by working with the counties who are highly affected, and also the national government to be able to look at the impact of this and trying to save as many people as you can be able to. But Bramwell, going back to that question I'd earlier asked you with regard to counties, were counties caught flat-footed despite the fact that this prediction was given, months before where we are right now? But it appears still there wasn't. Was it that fact that people did not take the El Nino warning seriously, or where could have the problem, come from?
Well, thanks, Zainab. Speaking for Nairobi County, I can confidently state that we were prepared. Earlier on in the year, we as a sector and as a county government came up with a Marshall Plan that was to address these impending floods as well as other disasters. And we had a two-pronged approach. One was to look at the infrastructure interventions that I've talked about in terms of addressing the primary cause of the flooding in Nairobi, which was really the poor drainage system. And in that light, we've actually been running a very concerted effort to, like I mentioned, clear all the drainage system that have been blocked, the culverts, etc., led by the 3,000 strong army, Green Army. Just to put things in context, Zainab, the last time we had environmental workers in Nairobi, the last team was recruited more than 30 years ago. So we've had a gap in that space where we had boots on the ground that were able to lead the charge, in terms of cleaning and greening and ensuring that the flash water and the floods find their natural pathway. So that has been ongoing, and like I mentioned, I think we've registered very significant and positive results. But the second pillar was then the social and humanitarian aspect, which then anticipated what happens in the event that families are affected. And like I mentioned, what we are witnessing now is mostly in areas where people are living on riparian lands, or in areas where, because of other human factors such as building on drainage systems and blocking the natural pathways, we have the flooding that's happening.
But now that we're in this situation, you still have residents who are living along the river banks, like Ngong River.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing about that?
So I was saying that the second pillar of, other than the infrastructure support, is then to work with the with the other humanitarian actors, such as the Red Cross, as my colleague Peter has mentioned. We are working very closely with the Red Cross and what is known as the Nairobi Hub, which brings together the humanitarian agencies, including but not limited to WFP, to come up with contingency plans, evacuation plans, identifying alternative shelter for those that are affected and displaced. Also deploying our public health teams, the community, the CHPs at the forefront, to come up with measures to prevent any secondary disasters, mostly disease-related. So we have teams on the ground that are actually providing aquatabs. We're working with the Red Cross and other agencies to stockpile relief support, but most importantly to come up with early warning systems that allow us to communicate with these affected communities in the Mathare, Mukuru, Kibera, that when the rains are impending, they can be able to move to higher ground. We've also identified what I'd call temporary shelters, such as social halls that we put at the disposal of our partner agencies, where we can, if the need arises, relocate those communities that moving.
But
of course,
as a
it's-
county,
yes.
were you able to communicate to these communities who were at most at risk by telling them that you need to move away from these high risk areas, or were there any kind of information that was disseminated to these people?
Absolutely. Indeed, part of the Marshall Plan was public communication and awareness, and working very closely with other agencies, including the national government. We've worked very closely with the district county commissioners, SECs, to run public barazas, public engagements, to just create awareness, to mark the high zones and those areas that are vulnerable, and to work with the community agencies just to build community resilience. Now, naturally, of course, we know that because of many other factors, some people are reluctant to move. But I think by and large, I'd say that we've registered a lot of cooperation from most members of the public. Those that were advised to move have done so. Those that didn't, unfortunately, have been affected, and you're working very closely with these humanitarian agencies. And even as a sector, we've provided for stockpiling of relief support that will extend to these communities. And this is ongoing even as I speak. We are working quite closely with the Red Cross.
Right.
We've also put at the disposal of the public a toll-free number, 1508, where they're able to call in the event that we have any of these challenges, and it has worked fairly well. We recently had challenges in Molem area, in Embakasi, and the public is able to reach out to us and be able to deploy our teams immediately. We've had challenges in some parts of Kawangware, where again the public is able to engage. So part of our strategy has been to ensure that we have communication channels, but most importantly to work with our other partners to ensure that we provide some alternative support to those communities that have been affected by these floods.
But just very quickly, I know from the Kenya Red Cross, they have about, the statistics indicate about 26,000 families have been affected.
Right.
As a county, do you have statistics that, just surround Nairobi County?
Yes, again, just to mention that part of our Marshall Plan was to this multi-agency working formula. We've been working together. We've not been working in isolation.
All right.
So the statistics that they do have are the same figures that we have. What I know is that at the onset, in the preliminary discussions, the projections were that we need to prepare to provide for and support, in the worst case scenario, up to about 200,000 individuals,
right,
drawn from those 20,000 households or thereabouts. So we are working not in isolation, but together with the other actors in this particular situation.
Okay. Yeah. And Dr. Gikongo, thank you for staying with us. And like I said before, we lost a bit of your signal there. It's clear that you are indeed experiencing an El Nino, like you said, but break it down for us how this phenomenon really has an impact on the flood that we're seeing, and what is the likelihood that this will get worse? Is there a likelihood that the severity of the floods is going to increase?
Thank you once again, Zainab. We are still monitoring the event as it unfolds. And what is important to note right now is that even without El Nino, the short rain season has a peak, and that is normally in November. And now that we are under this El Nino phenomenon, the enhancement of the rains is also expected to be higher in this month of November. Going back to your question, yes, we are expecting that the season will run up to the end of the season, and that is December, and there is a very high likelihood that some parts of the country will continue receiving rainfall into January 2024.
So what does that mean for us, and what are some of these, are there specific factors that are sort of contributing to the severity of these rains that, like you say, now we're going to experience in some parts more rains, this rains continuing up until January next year?
As the chief manager for Nairobi, Mr. Simiyu mentioned about topography of Nairobi.
Right.
That would be the description for the entire country, because we have different types of relief all over the country. some places are fairly flat, and those level grounds of northeastern Kenya, you see, when we have this kind of deluge, the effect is quite high. You go to the highlands, again, because of the nature of the topography, with time, the moisture that has gone into the ground causes some of the parts to give way, leading to landslides, mudslides, and other effects that we have seen. And in other places, those rising levels of water bodies, the effects are many depending on where one is in the country.
All right.
Yeah.
And Peter, talking from a humanitarian perspective, so these rains might continue up until next year, unfortunately, and that will mean some counties will have to deal with this for a bit longer. So what does that mean for the humanitarian response, at least, you know, from that perspective? What do we expect to see?
We looking at the trends, because we are guided by trends, we are guided by indicators, working very closely with weather institutions like the Kenya Meteorological Department, is in fact even looking at from the second week of October to now how the numbers have steadily been increasing. We are likely to see either more people displaced, areas, I mean, it's taking longer for people to go back to normalcy, because if the flooding is likely to continue, if areas are likely to remain marooned, then that means they may need to be staying in the temporary shelters for a longer while. And that means there might be more need to sustain these people in those temporary shelters. That includes now supporting them to meet their food needs, supporting them to meet their health needs, supporting them to even be able to attend medical facilities. We see people who have chronic illnesses that need to be supported to continue receiving their medication. So that means having mechanisms in place that can continue to sustain relief support to people who are affected in the areas that are affected until normalcy resumes. So we are optimistic. We don't want to just paint a picture of doom. We want to say that best case scenario is the water levels are harvested. I mean, if there are water harvesting mechanisms. Kenya Red Cross has even engaged some communities to take advantage of these early rains to do early maturing crops. So we are seeing cases whereby we will have food harvested, but we are seeing cases whereby there is likely to be post-harvest losses in the event that some areas are heavily flooded and there's a lot of water to affect harvesting. These are some of the effects that we're likely to see. So disease outbreaks, those are things that water and vector-borne diseases. Yeah, so in short, Zainab is a longer sustained relief support to people who will have been affected in temporary shelters. That's what we are likely to see for a while.
All right. Would you compare what we're experiencing now to what we experienced about 7 years ago when we also had the El Nino rains pound the country?
It's difficult to tell, but again, going by, you see right now what we are left with is to try and look at what the climate scientists are telling us, what the predictions are telling us, and how we can prepare better to be able to address this. So would we compare it with 7 years ago? What we've been told by science is that the El Nino phenomenon, coupled up with what we are calling IOD, Indian Oceanic Dipole, is likely to amplify this time round. And as you've heard Daktari saying, that the peak is likely to go higher than normal. So if that is the case, then that is likely to tell you that the effects this round could be dire, depending, I mean, looking at what the weatherman says.
Right.
Yeah, so we are prepared either way. Kenya Red Cross, the approach we take is to anticipate, to use early warning information to prepare, hoping for the best, working with communities, but being ready at the same time to swing into action when communities need to be supported.
Right.
And most importantly, just to mention Zainab, I think you had talked about a question, and I'm really happy, Bram, I just don't know him by meeting him in studio. As a matter of fact, we've had a series of engagement, series of meetings, series of trying to coordinate with government through the Deputy President's Office, Then the UN agencies using the hub system that we are having in different sectors to just try and ensure that humanitarian assistance is coordinated. We are together anticipating, we are linking closely with the Kenya Meteorological Department to see how the effects are likely to unfold and how we can be better prepared as a response agency, as a humanitarian agency, complementing the government to be ready to support people as and when these effects come. Just as I finish, Zainab, to say, has this paid off? Are there some activities that have been done in anticipation, and has it paid off? For Kenya Red Cross, for example, we've been able to work with county governments and stakeholders to pre-position in the month of September and October, taking action to put things in place. You see, like Wajir now is cut off. But for us, we are not, we had already moved in supplies into Wajir before the roads were cut off, and Mandera and Garissa, because we anticipated that should these rains come as it is anticipated, the roads will be cut off. It's happening now. We took boats to some of the areas, which the other 2-3 days, we were able to even rescue farmers who had been marooned, and there were no ways of getting them out. Our aqua rescue team, who had also been trained in anticipation, came in handy to be able to now swing into action, go and evacuate those people. So there's been a number of preparedness activities, anticipation, trying to see how the situations will unfold, and that is still the same thing we are approaching day in, day out as we continue engaging relevant stakeholders, working very closely with KMD to just say, how does it look going into the future, and how better can we prepare? What we require a lot also, that we must say from the Kenya Red Cross perspective, is this, we are not able to do this without support, without relief assistance, because this means we will go longer than expected. That means there is much more muscle required to walk the long distance that is likely to be if it is. But we are prepared. We are ready to work with communities. We are ready to engage as much as it takes to make sure that we are saving lives. We are trying to help communities to mitigate where possible, to move early where it's possible, but where they are affected, to respond and save lives and get them to safety.
All right. And even as we continue this conversation, I'd like us to hear what a member of parliament from one of the affected counties had to say. I think that's the Garissa Township member of parliament. Let's get that bite.
River Tana has broken its banks, destroyed all our farming activities. Farmers were ready to harvest in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but now they cannot even access their farms as we speak. Many of our people have been displaced. Those who lived along the river are now displaced and have become internally displaced people and are occupying higher grounds at schools, primary schools, compounds, and the situation is not good. And this is the first phase of this El Nino rains. We are expecting more, as forecast by weathermen, that this thing will continue in the next 2 months. So we're asking the government to intervene. We have some activities now going on with the Red Cross and who are trying to help. But as things go as they are now, we fear that there will be disease outbreaks, diarrhea, cholera, mosquitoes, malaria, and all that kind. So we are hoping that the government will hear our voice, will hear our cries, and come to the aid of our people in the region.
And also, indeed, we've seen leaders from across those parts of the country that have been highly affected calling for these floods to be declared a national disaster. Bramo, do you think we're there yet?
Well, for Nairobi, Zainab, I do believe that we need assistance in certain areas, but I don't think we've gotten to a crisis level yet. You know, in the past, we would be in a situation where Uhuru Highway is unpassable. We would be in a situation where many areas, lives have been disrupted, critical infrastructure has been destroyed, or disease outbreaks at a scale that is worrying are in place. But I think this time round, where we sit, I think we are prepared. And I think what is different this time round, Zainab, is that we realize that disaster cannot be fought in isolation. We need to be able to synergize with the other key actors. And as I mentioned, the preventive infrastructure-related measures that we've been doing and which we intend to sustain, I think will play a critical part in ensuring that the lives and livelihoods and normal business in Nairobi is minimized. I think that has been the cornerstone of our strategy, that cure the primary cause, which is a poor drainage system, poor sewerage system. Focus on fixing that. Like my colleague mentioned, let us prepare, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So I think speaking for Nairobi, I do not think that we are at a stage where the public should be alarmed that as a county government working in partnership with our humanitarian partners, that will be overwhelmed. I believe strongly and confidently, and I believe I speak for His Excellency the Governor, that we should not panic, we should not unduly worry. We'll do our best to ensure that those that are affected are supported.
Right.
Let me just remind you that the cornerstone of this administration's manifesto is to create a city of order where citizens have hope and live in dignity. And I think there's no better place, or there's no population that needs that hope and dignity more than those that are affected. So we are confident that we will work closely to manage those that are staying in riparian lands, because they are there already, and there's very little you can do really in terms of displacing huge segments of population. What you can just do is to mitigate, in the best way possible, to ensure that you don't have secondary disasters happening.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. If you're still with us, what are your thoughts on the calls for the floods to be declared a national disaster? Do you think we are at that stage?
Thank you once again, Zainab. What we cannot do is paint the country uniformly, because the effects are not the same. Going by my earlier description of the differences in topography.
Right.
But the areas that are already marooned, like the screeds that you are showing, it's clear. When it doesn't affect anyone, it's just a hazard. But when it is already causing destruction, that is a disaster. And if there is something that can be done to avert it, why not?
Yes.
I don't know whether I've answered your question.
You have. I was hoping you would continue with that statement. But yeah, Peter, is something you'd like to add on in terms of the same question on the issue of those particular calls?
I think how we could put it, Zainab, is normally somebody feels where the shoe pinches the most. And probably if you see, and just like Dr. has said, and Bramwell, different parts of the country are being affected differently. Like you see right now, Wajir, Mandera, and Garissa are mostly affected. You find that there are parts of Tana River, and then you find that there are parts of Isiolo that are adversely affected. So the thing is, across the country, there are areas where the rains are a blessing, because it's allowing people to go on with their normal lives, or even to do crop production or look at that. But then there are areas where it's affecting post-harvest losses. There are areas where people are totally marooned, and for them, they will feel it's a disaster, and it is isolating them, and it's disrupting their businesses. There is loss of livestock. So as to whether it should be a national disaster or not, we believe, Kenya Red Cross believes that the government has its apparatus and mechanisms and thresholds that it can use to make such a determination. What we would just say is there are areas that are affected that need attention, that needs to be looked into much more closely, to be supported much more closely, depending on the effects that they're experiencing in the various parts of the country.
Right.
Yeah.
And going back to an issue you had mentioned, but just to delve a little bit much deeper into that, is the issue of the early warning systems in terms of preparation for the floods associated with what we're seeing right now, which is the El Nino phenomenon. How effective do you think they have been in recent years, as from a Kenya Red Cross Society's perspective? Have they managed to help the situation?
Yeah, and Zainab, having a candid conversation about this, and gladly Kenya Red Cross has been able to walk this journey, and we can look as back as 1998 and seeing how the trends have changed. We must say we've come a long way into understanding, having more accurate early warning systems, having more robust mechanisms, having more community and county level and stakeholder engagement. We must give credit where it's due. We are not where we would have loved to be, but there is tremendous improvement. We are having a reliable weather forecast that we can receive from KMD that at least you can look at and you say this is a credible forecast.
Right.
We are having now conversations that are happening. County levels, like using again Bramwell, for example, and this is not just Nairobi County alone, even Kiambu, we've had a number of county engagements. Conversations are happening around unpacking early warning systems. And communities also are beginning to understand that this is how it's affecting us, these are the actions we need to take early. So have they been more effective? If I may look at this trend and this time, I would say we are at a better place because it has allowed us to even engage communities. For instance, we have community-based disease surveillance mechanisms. We are having communities being able to say that these are the safer areas, this is how the floods affect us, this is how we will know that we need to move. So we are at a better place. We are not yet there. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done. There is still more that needs to be unpacked as to having more effective early warning systems. But we are at a better place right now. And if we are to look, because you want to measure something against another.
So comparably, we are on the right trajectory.
We are in the right, I would say, we are not where we should be, but we are in the right trajectory. Because even like right now, we've been able to prepare better. We've been able, like even as an institution, as Red Cross, we found ourselves in better places now, being able to take action early, being able to preposition instruments of response early in good time, based on credible forecasts that we've been able to receive. So, and even to say, just so that everybody knows, is we are even, Kenya Red Cross has decided to be proactive. We're even having a program of engaging counties and communities much more closely to understand. Now that we have credible early warning systems, now that we have products, what is the gap that it's not triggering action at the ground level? What are the challenges? You know, some of the things that Bramwell was even mentioning earlier about socioeconomic perspectives.
Right.
Probably a community has received an early warning and it says move, but where do I move to? How am I leaving my things? We've seen there are instances whereby people want to move, but they don't even have money to move their belongings. So do they need support at that particular time to do what we are calling anticipatory action? So currently there are conversations about what does it mean to have anticipatory action? Do we need to put resources for anticipatory action so that when we tell people move, we are also supporting them to move. We are helping them to understand where are you moving to, how are you going to move there, and when normalcy resumes, how do you go back? So that's where we are at with early warning systems, in the sense that we are having better products right now, and now the discussion is around how do we make sure these early warning systems trigger action from the community level. What are the barriers? What are the challenges? How can we now unlock those challenges that probably impede communities from now acting early based on information or early warning information that they've been given?
But essentially, where does the responsibility fall when it comes to pushing for, taking the measures that need to be taken, to avert this crisis? Because you have the systems, which you say are credible. Where does it fall? Is it the leadership of some of these counties? Is it lack of perhaps coordination? Although you say there is good coordination between organizations, multi-stakeholder, conversations when it comes to tackling this matter. Where do you think, someone is falling there?
Yeah, and correction, my word was not good coordination, but improved coordination.
All right.
Improved coordination in the sense that we are improving how we are coordinating. Yeah, but I think it falls on everyone, Zainab. I don't think it's one particular person's responsibility. Meteorological department, for instance, the weatherman releasing products that can be relied upon, which they're doing, giving advisories when they should. The leadership institutions making sure there are mechanisms to disseminate this information to the communities and engaging in discussions of finding ways of supporting communities to receive this early warning information. And at the community now level, receiving this information and acting upon the information that is shared. So it's an all-inclusive approach.
Right.
So the question now we will start wanting to unpack is everyone playing their role? Okay. For example, is the weatherman giving the advisory as and when they should? Is it a credible product? Now, if they have released it, how are the leaders receiving them and how are they unpacking them? For example, at the county level, are they taking heed on the advisories given? What mechanisms are they putting in place? are they now acting on those early warning? For example, clearing drainages, developing contingency plans, developing communication channels, and even feedback loop for communities. And then it does not stop there. Now, as we cascade that information down to the communities, so how now are the communities acting? On the leadership level, are we providing alternatives for them, like safe areas for evacuation, identifying areas where people can be evacuated to, and communicating the same to the communities? Then when the communities are informed, them taking action. Because you cannot go and now start forcing people and lifting them out of their houses to move into a safe shelter.
That would be unrealistic.
That would be unrealistic.
Right.
But I must give feedback that also what we are experiencing that is interesting is communities also take time to respond. I remember an incident where we had somebody saying, for me, as long as the water has not reached knee level, you can say all you'll say, but I'll not
Niko sawa.
Niko sawa.
Right.
Some people wait until they are seeing some things are being carried. And it's I mean, this seems to be the natural phenomenon of people. They wait until they see it's critical, then they start running the last minute. So these are the dynamics that are in play that we have to put into perspective when we are talking about early warning systems and them being effective.
All right. And Bramwell, I mean, yes, early warning systems, you've talked about perhaps, you know, for example, what Nairobi County had, you know, put in place in terms of what they needed to do, the measures that put in place to ensure they would be able to, you know, combat and tackle this particular matter. But do you feel like there's still some gaps left there when it comes to those particular measures?
Well, I think just to echo what Peter said, and just to maybe also appreciate that perhaps what has also made early warning systems more effective this time is the role of technology and media, such as this show. You know, just being able to articulate and have this discussion in a much more focused manner on a prominent national TV station like this helps to elevate public awareness. And my take is that, you know, people hope for the best and people want to survive, but people also conscious of the perils that come with the disasters and floods. So just by appreciating that, you know, those other elements that Peter has talked about, I think for me, I would appreciate that this time around, the public has been much more receptive, given that when you look at the social governance structure, which has cascaded down even to the Nyumba Kumis, you know, these effective communication channels, you know, the decentralized system of government, county government, sub-county teams, the ward admins, we are able to articulate an agenda and it reaches each household. And therefore, you're able to trigger behavior change. You'll realize that, of course, there'll always be the doubting Thomases who, like Peter mentioned, will wait for the worst case scenario. But by and large, most of them are receptive of you know, the warnings that are given to them. Most of them seek alternatives. Of course, they'll ask you, where do I go to?
Right.
And it's also the role, the duty and responsibility of the county government to, for example, build affordable housing so that those that are living in riparian lands are able to have an alternative. We're also conscious of the role of technology that I've talked about. I think social media has become a powerful agent for, you know, really communicating and triggering this kind of change. So my take is that we're in a better space, you know, if any feedback that we've received is to be, you know, trusted, I do believe that we're in a better space. And I say this, you know, putting things in context. In the past, we've had cases of fatalities in Nairobi County whenever floods happen. And a recent case happened actually during the long rains in October, where we had an unfortunate incident in the Waruku area in Kileleshwa. A family was swept in their sleep. And unfortunately, baby Ashley Ashley was swept away. And up to date, we've not been able to, you know, to recover her. But given that experience, when our teams on the ground engage with the community, you could see that there's enhanced awareness, there was better cooperation levels, and I think the community now is better seized of the perils and understanding that they need to trust these early warning systems, that it's better to be alive in a safe space than not be alive, you know, by clinging to, you know, to an environment that is actually perilous and will affect you and your family.
Right.
So I'm confident, I'm optimistic that the efforts we put in place are paying off. The public is much more aware, the public is much more cooperative, and I think together, as Peter mentioned, it's the responsibility of everybody. I like saying that disaster management starts with you, even with in terms of littering, in terms of throwing garbage, because that is a primary cause. When the rains come, they'll sweep away all these things that you throw away without thinking about, and that's what goes to unclog, to block and destroy our drainage system. So I believe that the message is sinking home. We are becoming much more resilient. We are becoming much more aware in terms of the environment we live in and the need to protect ourselves against any perils that may arise from these hazards that we face.
But you both raise very interesting and pertinent issue here. As much as we're becoming more resilient, as much as the systems are changing for the better, you still have, and I think what Peter had mentioned is the issue of the economic, socio-economic situation of some of these people. It is true that some will say, look, if I leave my house, where will I go? And you have nowhere else to go. You say, yes, counties need to be more proactive. Let's build affordable housing. Let's put up, temporary structures for these people. But is that the case? Is that what counties have done? Is that what the national government has done?
Well, speaking for the county government of Nairobi, I can say that that is indeed part of what you're doing. Again, just to remind ourselves about His Excellency Manifesto and even the current structure of government. We have a dedicated department known as Business and Hustler Opportunities, which actually is focused towards creating opportunities, for the bottom of the pyramid, for that cadre that has actually been most affected, and just taking the cue from even the Green Army that is leading the charge towards helping to keep our drainage system and environment clean. The 2,500 opportunities that were created and the additional 1,000 that the county government has advertised goes towards addressing that primary problem of the socio-economic challenges that you're facing. These 3,500 young men and women that have been given opportunity to lead the charge in terms of keeping Nairobi clean and green, the ripple effect is that the trickle-down effect is that there's a positive economic benefit that then accrues to them and their families. So the county government is actually keen on this bottom-up agenda, which I believe is aligned to what the national government is always doing. You know that the centerpiece of His Excellency President William Ruto's administration is really the bottom-up transformative agenda, which focuses on creating opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid through creating access to markets, access to credit, ensuring that there's a appropriate business environment that can allow them to earn a decent living. Is it paying immediate results? The jury is out. But I think you're doing the right things, and I think in the medium to long term, we'll see the payoff in terms of an empowered society, given the opportunities that are being created by both the national and the county government.
All right. Well, Brahma, we'll still come back to that because I don't think you've answered my question,
Yeah.
but we have to take a break.
Yeah.
We'll be back, and Dr. will be giving us some, at least advice on what we can be able to do and some recommendations for Kenyans to stay safe during this period, and of course having to be informed on the issue of floods. Let's take a quick break. We're going to be back. Well, thank you for staying with us on AM Live NTV this morning as we tackle the issue of the El Nino, the rains and the pains, and of course what we've witnessed in some parts of the country, heavy pounding of the rains that have affected families. We do have the numbers, about 26,000 households who have been impacted by the floods. With me is Dr. Gikungu as well from the Kenya Met Department, who's the director. Dr. From where you sit and of course from the experience that we've had before and now, what lessons do you think we can learn from the flood events we've experienced in the past and right now to improve our resilience and response strategies? We've heard from Bramwell, we've heard from Peter as well, but from your perspective, what more can we be able to do?
Thank you once again, Zainab. There is a lot to say in terms of lessons, what we have seen. Let me start with saying that the El Nino event we are going through is not the last one.
All right.
I like what I am hearing from my colleagues from Nairobi City County and also from Red Cross, that we are not where we were 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. Let me mention something like the El Nino that was observed in 1983. Mm-hmm. Before 1997 happened, 1983 was the worst. Mm-hmm. The kind of devastation and the strength of the signal itself. We cannot yet talk about the magnitude of this one because it is an ongoing event. When it is over, we'll be able to compare with the others, 1997 and so on. And by the way, in 2016, we had an El Nino. It was very strong, but since the other accompanying drivers that result in heavy rainfall did not happen, so it is not much to talk about. But in terms of what we observe, there was something like that. So what I'm saying is that since this is not, let me put it simply. Let's prepare that this can happen again, and put things right. What we need to do should it happen. My office is trying its best, and we are working with the current technology in terms of early warning. That information we shall give, but it is supposed to cascade, and it is supposed to be information that we take action on. The observed frequency of El Nino events is 2 to 7 years.
Right.
Sometimes they interact with La Nina. La Nina is the opposite of El Nino, which results in drought conditions in this zone. And it, like I had said earlier, in other places, it causes heavy rainfall. As we speak now, what we are going through is the opposite of what Australia is experiencing, because they have serious drought onsetting, and we do not know how long that is likely to last. So that is one, the issue of frequency, that we live with that expectation. And like my colleague had said, we hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Number two, take the information as it comes seriously. When we doubt, we encourage ourselves to relax, even on things that we could easily have done for ourselves. Number three, it is not all doom. It is possible for us to take advantage of what is going on now, because as we witness destruction, and I'm very sorry about lives lost, property damage, and hopelessness that we see from the pictures that you show, I'm also aware that there are places where normally you cannot grow food because the situation normally doesn't allow it. But El Nino an El Nino event like this one brings about a reversal where we are able to grow food, and the challenge later on becomes storage of the same food, because we are not used to harvesting. Normally, we do not have the barns where to store the food. And lastly, we are engaged in a very, very good program that may help us even recover our climatic conditions if we do things right. Tree growing. This is the right time to grow trees, even in those places I have mentioned but we need to be guided by experts. And since we know that this is only a season, being a season means that it will come to an end. Is there a way of spending some of the resources and ensure that the water that is coming upon us is also stored so as to continue the growth of trees when the season has left us? I don't know whether that is good enough, Zainab, or I should continue.
No, that's good enough. You've talked about the issue of water harvesting as well. But just very quickly before I let you go, Daktari, I mean, you've talked about the issue of tree planting. However, there have been questions and concerns on, yes, we have this tree planting exercise that we expect to have on Monday, but are we really informed on the species of trees that we need to, plant? Where do we need to plant? Because it doesn't mean we can just plant trees everywhere and that is going to help our situation, really. Do we need to have, information disseminated to the public on the, understanding, the issue of tree planting? Because there's some areas where you'll plant a tree that certainly that tree is not going to survive.
That's a good one, Zainab. And as far as that one is concerned, we are in a very good place. We have experts in Kenya. We have institutions like KEFRI and others within the Ministry of Environment. They will tell you where not to try to grow certain species of trees. They will tell you what is best where. They also know what particular areas to protect from various ravages. And it is, in that one, we are not wanting. That one I can assure you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Peter, I mean, yeah, so Doc has mentioned quite a number of things as well there, but there was something we talked about while we were on our break, and it's the issue of sustainability of some of these measures that we put in place from both the national and the county government itself, coming up from the early warning systems and ensuring that at the end of it all, because this is just an event that happens, right? 2 to 7 years, but for a short period of time, a couple of months. But we need to be able to put in the measures to ensure that, the communities, we work with the communities to be able to be resilient whenever this hits. So by the time we reach another 7 years and we're having another El Nino phenomenon in the country, you most likely where you sit, as, Kenya Red Cross and other stakeholders like Bramble, that, communities, the people who would be highly impacted are well prepared for it. Do you think we're in that space, in that conversation, or do you think there's still some issues that we need to fix?
We are not in that space, Zainab, and that's a very pertinent question, but we are in that conversation, I would say. Wearing my disaster risk reduction hat, whereby we work with communities to prepare, mitigate, and build their resilience. Resilience simply means you have a coping mechanism.
Right.
Coping mechanism means you have the ability to bounce back in your context. So the question would be, and I like Daktari has clearly indicated that there'll be another El Nino. There'll be several others, probably. When you see a period of 2 to 7 years, that means this is something that is going to live with us. In Kiswahili, we have that word kidonda ndugu, if I may use that illustration. So the issue is working with communities to build their resilience. So what does this mean? In your context, without taking you out of your context, how can we work with you to empower you to understand the hazards and risks that face you? And when these risks and hazards come, what actions would you naturally take by yourself without even anybody coming? For example, if you're in the context of you're living near water catchment areas, you will know that, yes, I'm living here, but I'm predisposed to landslides. I'm predisposed to flooding or backflows. And so, which are the seasons? If this flooding comes, what am I expected to do? Where will I go to? Is this the time for me to carry my belongings and go and visit and be with a relative for 2-3 months, then come back when this season has subsided? So if we are to address that question of resilience building, it's about having conversations with communities, and Kenya Red Cross has what we call community engagement and accountability mechanisms, to engage them, to understand the problems that face them, discuss with them on how to mitigate or how to act when those problems come, so that it's not about a dependency, it's not about being caught by surprise, but it's about anticipating, and that's why we are very passionate about anticipatory action. Anticipating, knowing that should this come, what am I expected to do even before I receive support?
But this is a conversation we should have had years back.
It's okay, you know, even when we start, we are in that space now. You might have wanted to have it. For example, I remember there's a time when Kenya Red Cross would talk about anticipatory action, we would have been laughed at because everybody else is saying, we are not seeing that. Red Cross, relax, wait until it hits us. And then we were waiting to hear Serikali's idea, then now we step in. But right now, everybody is seeing what Red Cross was seeing a couple of years back, to say that let's not wait to cry Serikali's idea. Let's see, let's hear what the weatherman is saying. Let's take some actions early, and then let's mitigate the risks. Then when the flooding gets off, because it's a seasonal event, it's a climatic and a seasonal event, then we get back to our normalcy. So yes, we should have had this conversation a long time back, but all is not lost. I can confirm to you, Zainab, right now, with the government, with stakeholders, we are having what we are calling the anticipatory action roadmap. And this anticipatory action roadmap, working together with the National Disaster Operations Center, the focus-based financing, KMD is part of it, Water Resources Authority and other climate-related stakeholders, is to develop a roadmap that will help us know what parameters do we look at, what early warning systems are in place, how are communities empowered to take action on their own to avert the effects of climate-related disasters, for that matter.
Right. I think one other question before I get to Bramo is the issue of hygiene and sanitation as well, which has been a big issue right now. Remember, even clean water has been a problem in many parts of the country right now. This has had a huge impact as well for those communities. What do you think needs to be done? Yes, Brahma, I'll get to you. I was just finishing up with Peter on that.
So what has to be done is provide assistance, and we have what we call hygiene promotion. For instance, under Kenya Red Cross, we have what we call the WASH unit, Water, Hygiene and Sanitation Unit. So we engage communities to help them understand that it's not just drinking any water. How do you get clean, safe drinking water? And also to provide what we are calling the water purifiers and the aqua tubs and the pools, for instance, that help to clean and purify water to make it safe for drinking. So what needs to be done to that is just empowering communities also to understand that not all water is safe for drinking, and then also to work with them to help them to know how to be able to have hygiene promotion activities, to be able to know them what predisposes them to contamination, and even also to empower them to be able to purify water on their own. And this, Zainab, has really proven to be effective in a number of cases we've had. And even like in this current flooding, those are some of the things Kenya Red Cross has ensured to preposition, including in all these high-risk areas, water purifiers, and also community engagement, as we are doing community disease surveillance, to do also community engagement on hygiene promotion.
All right. I'd like to hear Bramwell as well on that particular matter and how the county is handling that. But also, importantly, a viewer is asking, and specifically targeting you and asking, we need Bwana to tell us, they began doing, I think that's the county, a drainage in Imara Daima in anticipation of the rains. When the president said there will be no heavy rains, the contractor suspended operations, left open spaces. You have manholes all over. Now the rains have come back. However, they are not yet back on the site. It's an eyesore, and we have the tarmac roads which have been damaged and mounds of soils heaped on the walkways. Is the county aware of this, and what is it doing about it?
Well, thanks, Zainab. Let me also say that our plans and programs are not on the basis of pronouncement made by His Excellency the President. I think it's our duty and responsibility to ensure the safety and security of Nairobians through all the times. not because a situation has been downgraded or upgraded. And it's true that I know there have been a number of programs and activities going on in the country, and like I mentioned, the cornerstone of this has been the 3,500 Green Army that has been doing the unclogging and cleaning, and you're conscious that there are places that perhaps this has been done, but maybe the garbage or the debris has not been carted away. Now, what the county has done is to deploy additional equipment and materials to help us sort that out. And so we have, each county, we now have at least 2 trucks. We recently acquired about 27 new trucks to help us cut away garbage. We've deployed backhoes, we've deployed excavators to each of the sub-counties. Our Marshall Plan has been cascaded to the sub-county level. So in a situation where we have this concern, what I would urge my colleague Nairobian to do is report this to the ward admin, who will cascade this to the sub-county admin. At the sub-county level, we have a sub-county environment officer, we have a sub-county works officer, who are able to pick up these concerns on a daily basis, and we receive daily reports from the sub-county teams on matters such as this. I'll give you an example. We've had persistent problems with the General Madenge drive, which has been flooded over some time. But based on the feedback from the public and activating the sub-county admin administrative teams on the sub-county level, we were able to deploy a rapid response team which went and identified the cause of that constant flooding is a new development that is coming up. And we were able to have a conversation with the developer and got him to, working together with our engineers, we were able to, find an alternative pathway for the flood water. And as I speak this morning, I believe that that road is now free of that problem. So just to appreciate that, that could be one of the areas that need our intervention, and indeed we will take it up with the responsible teams on the ground, and we'll engage with the contractor to ensure that that situation is rectified. Back to the issue you talked about, public health, what we are doing as a county. Again, part of our Marshall Plan was to develop what you're calling sector-specific plans, which were then cascaded to the sub-counties. Now, one of the key dockets in this Marshall Plan is the public health and health sector. And we have a very deliberate program ongoing. You will recall that His Excellency Governor Sakaja commissioned the 7,000 strong community health promoters, the CHPs, who basically are taking public health to the household. Now, this team has been at the forefront of engaging with the public and sensitizing them and engaging with them and creating awareness on safe hygiene practices, in many cases even distributing aqua tabs for safe and cleaning water. So we have a very deliberate program that is ongoing to ensure that you don't get these secondary disasters that are triggered by floods, such as I think one of the honorable members mentioned, these disease-related disasters that may arise. Because what that does is that then it stretches our resources. It then takes us away from our core business.
But that is certainly likely to happen. We're going to see an increase in waterborne diseases as predicted.
Yes.
Are you able to counter that and give support to those especially most vulnerable who will be affected by, these kinds of diseases?
Absolutely. And I think just to also remind you that in the recent past you've seen, contrary to the past, we now have medicine available even in the small clinics and hospitals, even in the low-income areas. So access to health has been enhanced. The community health practitioners are the forefront leading this charge against this disease. Will you have instances of this happening? Yes. Will the impact be as widespread as in the past? I don't think so. I think the county government, having taken this conscious effort and working in conjunction with like I keep on mentioning, the other humanitarian focused workers, the UN agencies and the Red Cross, I believe that this concerted effort will be able to mitigate. We'll not eradicate it completely, but we'll be able to mitigate. But Zainab, also allow me to just chip in on the question you had asked before the break. in terms of what you're doing in terms of socio-economic empowerment. And
I want you to hold on to that thought,
yes.
And then we'll come back to that when you're making your final remarks.
Okay,
Let me begin with Daktari, as you wind up on this conversation. Your final remark, really, in terms of the situation right now, are there some challenges or obstacles that the Met Department is facing right now in terms of issues of monitoring, prediction, response, and what do you think can be done to address these challenges?
Thank you once again, Zainab. The issue of forecasting, like anything else today, depends on technology. And this is a growing technology. We try our best to keep up to it, up to the standards. And of course, we operate under the guidance of the World Meteorological Organization, where this time around I'm privileged to be a member of the Executive Council. And the setting of standards and ensuring that things are being done right. This is quite critical. The manner of observations that we did in the past, where of course, we still have stations all over, but we are phasing out the old instruments and putting up automatic weather systems,
right,
to enhance the technology and to keep up with the technology, and also to enhance the quality of the work, and probably also reduce on the reliance of human resource in some ways. But going forward, I think I will just repeat myself that we need to take the forecasts seriously. And in this day and age, it is also possible to compare what other countries are forecasting, because the systems are more or less the same. Instead of relying on social media, I think I would rather just go to other websites of the countries that give forecasts like ours, so that when you're talking about global issues, global phenomena like what we are talking about, you're able to compare, because the effects are different, but the genesis is more or less the same. Maybe you can talk about El Nino a little bit. In a normal season, we have winds blowing from east to west. To set off an El Nino, there is normally a reversal of that kind of flow, and it starts over South America, and we have an almost replica of the same over the Indian Ocean. So there are many things that we monitor. We cannot all do that. If you allow us to do our part, we will advise accordingly. And I advise, don't doubt what comes out of that. Along with this, there are models, and we have scientists working all the time. Even those who have done it before, they are improving on what they have established. We have a lot of stuff that is published. If somebody wants to maybe improve on what they did some 5 years ago, they do it, and they pick up new and younger scientists on board, and it is an ongoing science. It's ever growing. This is an exciting job that we do, and what comes out is something that is reliable. The messages that are released are authentic, and we are giving updates on daily basis, coupled with the weekly outputs, which has to be signed by the director, along with the monthly forecasts, and of course now, like what we are talking about, the seasonal forecast.
Right.
We have three main seasons in a year. Two are let's say we are talking about rainfall. Long rains, March, April to May. So short rains, October November and December. We have a third peak, and that is why I'm talking about main rainfall seasons. July and August, we have some parts, Nandi, Kericho, and Uasin Gishu in particular, they observe a third peak. Sometimes it can even be higher than what would be observed during the short rains. But that is how you can describe the climatology of Kenya in terms of rainfall. I hope that is useful information.
Indeed, it has been very useful, Daktari, to understand that. A bit technical, but it is understandable to that extent. However, we'll be able to perhaps engage with you more often so that we can, you know, at least get a better understanding of all those technicalities surrounding, you know, the rains, specifically the El Nino, and the phenomenon with, the climatic conditions surrounding that. But Peter, your final remarks as well as we move forward. Is there a way that people who have been impacted by the floods can be able to reach the Kenya Red Cross Society? Is there a toll line? What do you have for us?
Yeah, thank you, Zainab. Kenya Red Cross would like to underscore that, as usual, we are always there to work with communities, work with all stakeholders to avert loss of life and to mitigate the effects, including of climate change. We have structures across the 47 counties. We have our county branches, we have our county coordinators, and the beauty of Kenya Red Cross, we are down to the community level. We have sub-county structures, even community level, community health volunteers, Red Cross action teams. So communities, first of all, I know they understand in their local context how they can reach Red Cross.
Right.
But should they lack that, our toll-free number is 1199. That is 1199. And on this, when they call that, they will not be charged. They'll be able to speak to our emergency operations center, and they'll be linked to whatever services they need to be linked to. Just to finish by saying, Red Cross is very closely monitoring this situation, working with every stakeholder possible, the weatherman, KMD very closely, the government, both at the national and county level, and then also the community level structures to just make sure that we are there in time to support and to address the needs accordingly in as much as we can. We are aware that communities need to take advantage of this time, like even Dr. Gikungu has said. This is an opportunity for environmental conservation. Kenya Red Cross is also engaging in tree planting, environmental restoration, and working with communities to identify strategic water harvesting infrastructure that can help us tap into this. On food security and livelihoods, issues around post-harvest loss management, working with communities to see how do we make sure, and our food security and livelihood team is already working very closely, has identified counties, like we've mapped out 5 counties where we are really scaling up food production, early maturing crops, taking advantage of the rains because they're not very intense, but can give crop production, but also trying to support them to make sure we manage post-harvest losses. So Red Cross is engaging at all levels.
Do you think, just very quick, do you think we're going to be facing a food security crisis? Because look, we had the drought that we were facing last year up until early this year, and then just a couple of months in between, now we're experiencing these heavy rains, post-harvest losses in some areas because of the rains as well. Where does that put us as a country?
It depends on how we act now, Zainab, objectively speaking. If we manage this situation well to do water harvesting, if we manage the post-harvest losses, then we will have a buffer when the situation subsides. We will have a buffer. But if we don't manage it well, the rains will subside, then all of a sudden we get back into a drought scenario, then we might be faced again with another food insecurity scenario. So Red Cross, like I said earlier, we are using the opportunity as much as possible, but also being cognizant and anticipating the likely scenarios and preparing for all those. What we want to do is to work with all stakeholders and communities as much as possible to make the most of this, harvest as much water as possible, have a lot of crop production as much as possible, and support communities to be able to harvest those commodities as much as possible to be a buffer on food security. And then now, when we get back out of this season, then we see how the other situations unfold.
All right. Bramo, your final remarks as well.
Yeah, thank you, Zainab. I think for me, just to emphasize the fact that the commitment of this government and His Excellency Governor Sakaja's administration is to make Nairobi work. And to do so, we must ensure that there's a city of order, hope, dignity, so that opportunities abound. Now, and it is on that basis that His Excellency has elevated so it fit to create a fully fledged disaster management and coordination sector. Unlike in the past where we were just basically a unit in other departments. And this is in line with the global best practices, the Sendai framework that spells out disaster risk reduction as a cornerstone of managing disasters. So we have a lot of emphasis on mitigation and prevention, as opposed to response. Though we also, of course, enhancing our capabilities and efficiencies to respond as and when they happen, as well as rehabilitation. Now, in terms of my take-home message, really to say that the county government will do everything in its power to ensure that Nairobians live, their property and their lives are protected. But to emphasize that the responsibility of managing disasters or preventing disasters starts with ourselves as individuals. To encourage Nairobians that the reason we've been having flooding in the past and other water-related challenges has been because of littering and garbage, dumping of illegal garbage all over. Just to encourage the public that please be responsible. Start with your own environment. Do not litter, because when you do that, when the rains come, that is what will go to block the drainage system. And the ripple effect is what will now cause the problems that we have. So just to encourage them to be responsible citizens, also to encourage developers and people building up, putting up buildings. Do not build on drainage systems. Do not build on sewerage systems, because that is what leads to the problems, some of the problems you're facing at the moment. When Mother Nature comes calling, they will not care whether you have a house or not. They will come and destroy you. So we'll do everything in our power to sustain the efforts that is going on, led by the Green Army. We will strive to maintain the drainage systems, repair, rehabilitate those that are spoiled, and ensure that water can flow as and when it should. But also to just let members of the public know that we also have a toll-free number. In the event that there's an emergency, they can reach the county on 1508, just to complement what the Red Cross has in play. And this will help us to be able to respond as quickly as possible. But lastly, to say that our emphasis now is on saving lives and property. This administration has a very clear framework for socio-economic development, which at the right time we'll be able to elaborate on.
All right, thank you. Bramwell Simiyu, Chief Officer, Disaster Management and Coordination from Nairobi County. We also have Peter Murgor, who is the Manager at Disaster Risk Management from the Kenya Red Cross Society. Also joining us virtually was Dr. David Gikungu, Director from the Kenya Met Department. Thank you so much, Dr. and Simiyu, as well as Peter, for joining us this morning to have this conversation. We shall certainly be keeping a close eye on the situation across the different parts of the country and really looking to see how that situation pans out. But this is where we wind up on AM Live this morning. Talk to us. The hashtag, as always, is MLiveNTV at NTV Kenya. I shall be back in a short while. I'll be holding fort for Winnie Lubembe for Your World, which will be coming up in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us. I'm Zainab Ismail.